Okay, so I used to be in law school, and as you can imagine, I had to read hundreds and hundreds, and I mean hundreds of pages of dusty old textbooks every single week. So I don't think I picked up a single book voluntarily during that time at uni. And it wasn't until I quit my legal career and started my own business in a very different niche that I started to actually enjoy reading again. I started picking up books not because I had to, but because I actually was interested in learning new things like about productivity, self help, goal setting, business, entrepreneurship, all of these things I actually really wanted to learn about. And now, several years later, I think it's been 5 years now, I have read over 50 books this year alone, and the year isn't even finished yet. So, how did I go from someone who despised books, actually despised them, to someone who enjoys reading over 50 books a year? I want to talk about some of the tips that have really helped me get back into the habit of enjoying reading, and I hope that they can help you do the same. So my first tip is to read whatever you want to read and not something that you think you should read because others say you should read it. Just because everyone else is going on and on about Atomic Habits or Think and Grow Rich or any other classic self-help book doesn't mean that it will interest you as well. A book will only grab your attention if it's something that you're actually interested in, not because it's in the top 10 books of all times that every entrepreneur should read or something like that. Only read what you want to read. And the same kind of goes for book recommendations. So we all have those friends that will recommend a book to you because they're super hyped about it and it really changed their lives. But just because it changed their lives doesn't mean that it will also do the same for you. We all have different experiences and we all have different struggles and interests. Seriously, a book will only work its magic if you're the one that chose it. Okay, tip number 2 is about finding the right book. How do you find a book that you are genuinely interested in? Well, what I always do is kind of just look at what I'm in the mood for. For example, what kind of genre am I in the mood for? Is it something fictional or maybe self-help or business or something like that? And whenever I'm in the mood for nonfiction, I always check with myself, like what am I struggling with? Or what do I want to learn more about? For example, if I feel like I'm lacking focus or motivation, I would search for something like best productivity books. And then I always check the reviews on Amazon and on Goodreads. And I actually hardly ever touch anything that is below a 4-star review on Goodreads, because if a book has like 3 stars, it has them for a reason. The reviews don't lie in my experience. So either search online or you can also check the genres in Goodreads, or you could go check out hashtag booktok on TikTok, which is actually a really great hashtag if you want to start experimenting with different kinds of books. And the more you start experimenting with the hashtag, obviously the algorithm will pick up on whatever you like, and then you will get more and more great book recommendations. You can also take a look at the podcasts, YouTube videos, TV shows, movies, anything you really enjoy watching. They will also tell you a lot about what kind of genres you really enjoy. For example, if you're really into murder podcasts, then you could search for best murdery mystery books, for instance. Oh, and one thing you should always do is check out a sample before you buy the book. So you have this app called Kindle, and it's from Amazon. So it's the app that you get when you have a Kindle, which is an e-reader, and you can download free samples from the Amazon bookstore, and you can just download it on your phone. And then you can just read like the first 1 or 2 chapters most of the times. And then you can just decide if you like the book. Tip number 3 is stop reading a book if you are not enjoying it. This isn't high school. You don't get extra credit if you complete a book. So why would you do that to yourself? You're an adult, so you get to read whatever you want to read. And to make your reading journey as pleasant as possible, why not stick to the ones that you actually enjoy reading? Because if you continue reading the book, then chances are that you're going to lose motivation. And then somewhere along the line, you notice that you haven't read in weeks or months because you simply didn't want to. Reading shouldn't feel like a chore or task. It should be something that you enjoy. So if you don't, put down the book and choose something else. Then tip number 4, consider going digital. This little device has honestly changed the game for me. This is an e-reader. It's called a Kindle. I believe it's a Kindle Paperwhite, but I'm not sure. I will link it down below. But it's a Kindle and it has made reading so much easier for me. Like I said, the Kindle e-reader comes with an app, so you can also download it on your phone or on your iPad. So that way you have the book with you at all times. You can just open it on your Kindle, and then when you don't have your Kindle with you, you just open it on your phone and you can just continue where you left off. You don't have to search for the correct page. It will automatically update your reading progress. For example, if you're waiting on your train or you have a break and you're bored, instead of scrolling on TikTok, you can now also just grab your book and start reading. And I also really like the highlighting feature that it offers. It is so much simpler to just highlight something on your e-reader instead of just having to go get a marker and highlight your book and then you just never look at your highlights again. Let's be honest here. This way, if you have your highlights on your Kindle, you can also export them to your notes app, for instance. I use Readwise to kind of import my notes from my e-reader into my Notion account. So I will just have my highlights with me at all times, which is really, really convenient. And I know there is two kinds of people, especially in the book world. You're either going to enjoy the physical ones and you're going to prefer them, or you also like to try the digital version of a book. Now, if you're not convinced yet, I would definitely recommend that you just download the Kindle app and you look for a sample and then you just try it. You can just try it on your phone or on your iPad. And if you enjoy it, then you can consider buying an e-reader. But like I said, you can also just stick with it on your phone. And that brings me to my next tip. Try an audiobook. So if you're a very busy person and you don't really have the time to read, then you can start listening to an audiobook. I do this like when I'm driving or while I'm making dinner, cleaning, walking. Whenever I'm doing something that I can kind of do on autopilot, I combine it with a book. Tip number 6 is an actual game changer. And it might be a little crazy, but what I do is I read while I also listen. So I have an iPad, and on my iPad, I will open the split view function. So I will open the audiobook on this side over here, and then I will also open the ebook on this side. And what I will do is I just hit play, and I usually opt for like 2x speed. And then I start reading while I'm also listening. And I know this sounds insane because you have to buy both the ebook and the audiobook, but trust me when I say this, reading goes so fast, it's insane. Then tip number 7, which also is not for everyone, is to read multiple books at the same time. Now, hear me out. I don't mean read 10 pages of one book and then move on to the next and then move back to that one and just go back and forth. What I mean is have multiple book options at the same time. There is a time and a place for every single book. For instance, I really enjoy reading thrillers, but they are so gripping that when I read them, I can't seem to put them down. So I really avoid reading those before I go to bed, but I do still want to read them. So I choose to read them on like a Sunday afternoon when it's raining. And instead, I opt for one of those cozy novels before I go to bed because they're enjoyable, but not too stimulating, if you know what I'm saying. And the same for self-help books. They require a lot of focus, which I do not have if I'm lying in bed. So I read those during like my most productive hours, which for me are in the morning. So do you see how I can just kind of go back and forth between all of these different genres of books? Now, I know this is not for everyone. Some people really prefer to read only one book at a time, and I totally respect that. I'm only saying this because it has really helped me make reading a daily habit for me because I can just choose whatever I'm in the mood for. And sometimes that's a self-help book, but other days it's a cozy mystery. And I don't have to finish the self-help book first before I can dive into the mystery. So I think for me, it's a pretty good option, but like I said, I know it's not for everyone. Then tip number 8, make time to read. If you take anything away from this video at all, let it be this: no one finds time to read. No one finds time for anything. You have to make the time. And yes, I know we're all super busy, so it is really hard, but that doesn't mean that you can't make time. You don't have to read for hours at a time. You can just find something that works for you. And maybe that's 10 minutes every day when you're commuting to work or every Sunday morning, for instance. Personally, what has really worked for me is replacing things that take up a lot of my time that don't really serve me. For example, I used to be on TikTok for hours. So What I did was replace some of the time that I was on TikTok and read a book instead. So now every single night before I go to bed, I read a book, and I do the same every single morning before I touch my phone. And you can also just skip that last episode that you're planning on watching every single night on Netflix and start reading instead. You don't have to quit Netflix or TikTok altogether. Just find some time and replace it with reading. And like I said before, if you are really busy, then you could also try an audiobook, which you can just combine with things that you're already doing, like cooking or driving or anything else. Just make sure that you find something that works for you. Tip number 9 is to also track your progress. What has really helped me stay motivated to read is marking my progress on Goodreads. This way you will just know exactly how many books you have read so far for this year, for last year, and you can also keep track of all of the books that you want to read. And on Goodreads, you can even add your friends, so then you can also keep track of each other's books. And you can see how many books they've read and how many books you've read. So you can kind of gamify the process to make it a little bit more fun for yourself. I personally think it feels really good that whenever I finish a book, I go over to the Goodreads app and I mark the book as read. It's just this silly little thing, but it really does make it a lot more fun because it feels like you're rewarding yourself and like you're working towards something instead of just reading a book. So yes, track your progress. So tip number 10 is to process the book once you've read it. And this isn't necessarily a tip on how you can get started with reading, but more on how you can get the most out of your reading. And it kind of just applies to nonfiction only. But what I mean by that is once you have read the book, you are not done with the book because you want to get the most out of the book. So what you want to do is process what you've learned. How can you make your insights actionable? If you're not making it actionable, then why would you read the book in the first place? As I said before, I use an app called Readwise to integrate my Kindle, so my highlights, with my Notion, which is my note-taking app. And I can kind of just import all of the highlights that I have from Kindle into Notion. So I can just read them through and I always process them. So whenever I finish a book, I go to my Notion and I just go and take a look at all of those highlights and I try and distill key lessons from those. So I write down the lessons in a different document and I try to make it as actionable as possible because you're probably going to forget 90% of what you've learned in only a few weeks' time. It also makes it a lot more fun because eventually when you start processing multiple different books, you can kind of connect the dots between all of those books that you've read. Okay, so my last tip for you is to not force yourself. Do not force yourself to read. Reading should be something that you enjoy. We've probably all went to high school and we had to read there, but now we're adults and we don't have to do that anymore. So don't force yourself to read anything or read at a specific time. This is why I really don't like setting a goal for myself to read, for example, 20 pages every single day or by a specific deadline, because sometimes you're just not in it and you shouldn't start reading just for the sake of it. It's not about the numbers. It's about really enjoying the time that you spend reading. So those were my top tips. I really hope that they can help you fall in love with reading as well. And remember, the goal is not to read 50 plus books a year. It's about learning to love reading. So start small, make it work for you, and just have fun with it. Now, if you found this helpful, please hit the like button and subscribe for more self-help tips.